Hello, welcome to the Learn English Lab. Today's podcast, Advanced English Listening Practice topic name is Building Your Own Listening Journal for Growth. Okay, let's unpack this. We're diving deep into a simple yet, pretty revolutionary personal practice. We call this the deep dive because we're taking something that feels intuitive like deep listening and really breaking it down into an advanced skill. Because let's be honest, in a world that's just full of constant noise, social media pings, endless meetings, even podcasts like this one, actually mastering deep listening, it's rare, a really valuable skill, actually.
That's so true. And that's where we want to define the mission, if you will, of the listening journal. It's not, just jotting down a few notes here and there or like a diary of who said what. No, think of it more like a personal archive, almost like auditory archaeology. You're systematically documenting your listening experiences.
Yeah.
And the whole point is focused growth, deeper self-awareness, and building much stronger, more meaningful connections.
So we're basically taking everyday interactions, could be a tough negotiation, maybe a really dense lecture, or even just a vulnerable chat with your partner, and turning them into documented data points, data for our own behavioral improvement.
Absolutely. And this kind of practice, it really serves almost everyone. Professionals who want better team dynamics, students trying to, actually remember lectures.
Yeah, definitely students.
And really anyone looking to boost their emotional intelligence. So our goal today is to walk you through the why this is so important, the how, the practical steps, and the real tangible results you can actually expect if you stick with it. We're essentially building a roadmap right here to turn passive hearing into active self-development, all within your notebook or, your favorite app.
Okay, let's start at the root cause then. This listening deficit, I think we're all guilty of it, right? If you actually stop and track what your brain is doing during a conversation, you often find you're not really listening to get the other person's view or their emotion. You're listening to figure out your reply, just waiting for that little gap so you can jump in with your point or your story. The words go in, but the meaning, the context, the emotional vibe, it just gets filtered out by our own internal chatter.
And that failure to really absorb the true meaning, it's incredibly costly. It affects everything. There's a huge amount of research from psychology, organizational behavior, you name it. It consistently shows that active listening is fundamentally tied to improving our relationships, definitely boosting career success, and even having a measurable positive impact on mental health. Think about it, less stress from miscommunication, more emotional clarity.
Okay, that makes total sense intuitively, but here's where I want to push a bit. If the benefits are so clear, better relationships, better job prospects, why do they just slip away? If I listen really well in one meeting, why isn't that enough to, lock in those benefits?
Because without systematic reflection, those benefits are temporary. They're fleeting. Here's the key difference. Listening happens in the moment, but the learning, that solidifies later in that quiet space the journal provides. Your brain needs a mechanism, a process, to turn that raw input into encoded memory and, crucially, behavioral change. The journal is that mechanism.
So the journal takes that passive sound data, the stuff that just washes over us, and forces it into the thinking part of the brain for actual analysis.
Spot on. It demands introspection. Think about a really charged conversation, maybe politics or some social issue that leaves you feeling drained.
Oh, yeah. We've all been there.
Right. In that moment, your brain's flooded. Emotion, counter-arguments racing. But later, with your journal, you can deliberately pause. You can ask yourself, okay, what biases did I bring into that? Was I just listening to score points? Or did I genuinely try to understand where they were coming from, even if I disagreed? That kind of introspective documentation is how you start to dismantle your own echo chambers. It's moving beyond just, here's what they said, to really analyzing your own behavior in the interaction.
I like that emphasis on spotting our own biases. We definitely need something to catch ourselves. But let's make this really concrete, professionally speaking. How does this reflection actually translate into, say, a better career outcome? Let's talk about Sarah's story.
Sarah's a great example of this practice leading to real professional impact. She's was a 32-year-old marketing manager, I believe, in Chicago. She started her listening journal because she was hitting this wall, constant misunderstandings at work, feeling like she wasn't leading her team effectively. She pinpointed a key issue. She was always interrupting people in meetings.
Oh, the interrupter.
Yeah. and often assuming she knew what they were going to say before they even finished.
That's such a classic trap, isn't it? Especially for managers. You think being quick means being competent, and you rush to fill the silence instead of letting people, fully form their thoughts.
Precisely, and Sarah's approach was very methodical, which is really important here. After every single important team call, every high-stakes conversation, she journaled. But she didn't just write down what was said. She specifically noted the exact moment she felt that urge to jump in. And then she'd compare what she thought they were going to say with what they actually said.
Wow, okay. So she created this direct feedback loop for herself, showing the gap between her assumptions and reality. What did that show her?
It showed a really consistent pattern. Impatience, mostly. And maybe a bit of overconfidence in her ability to predict what others were thinking. Her journaling prompts came specific. Things like, what underlying need might have been driving that person's statement? Or, if I just waited 3 more seconds, what extra detail might have come out? She started trying to document not just the words, but the pauses, the tone shifts, the emphasis. She realized she had to learn to hear the unsaid.
And the result for her?
Over about 6 months, the change was really noticeable, both in her journal entries and in her behavior. Team feedback got way better. Her colleagues started saying they felt genuinely heard, valued. This led to better brainstorming, smoother projects. And the bottom line, because of this shift, this dramatically improved ability to connect and understand, she got a significant promotion. That quiet, daily habit of structured reflection, that was the engine behind her career jump.
That's a powerful story. A simple 15-minute reflection habit changing a career path. And this isn't just based on stories like Sarah's, is it? There's actual data backing this up.
Oh, absolutely. We have statistical validation. Organizations like the International Listening Association, their research confirms how effective reflective practices like journaling really are. The data strongly suggests that consistently documenting and analyzing your listening can boost overall listening comprehension by, quite a bit, up to 25%.
Wow, a 25% improvement. It's huge, especially considering it comes from changing your intention, not just, listening to more stuff. But help us understand why it works on a deeper level. What's the cognitive thing happening? Why does reflection boost how much we actually retain?
It mainly works on 2 key fronts, memory encoding and cognitive challenge. So when you first hear information, it lands in your short-term memory.
Right.
The physical act of writing it down, comparing it to your gut reaction, analyzing it later, that forces your brain to move that information into more stable long-term memory structures. That's the encoding part. But then by making yourself articulate the other person's viewpoint in your journal, you're actively fighting your own confirmation bias. You're forcing yourself to really grapple with their perspective, which makes your understanding deeper, richer, and dramatically improves comprehension.
That makes the benefit feel really solid, evidence-based. It's not just a soft skill, it's like a cognitive upgrade. Okay, this is where it gets really interesting for me, because the advantages go way beyond just understanding things better. They lead to profound, real-world changes in our personal lives, our relationships, and how effective we are professionally.
Yet, once you commit to this reflective practice consistently, you start unlocking these multiple layers of benefits. The journal really becomes this multifaceted tool. It impacts everything from how your own mind works internally to how you interact with people externally.
Okay, let's start inside then. The journal really acts like a mirror, doesn't it? Showing us our inner world in detail. Every entry can reveal not just what someone else said, but how you processed it, how you reacted emotionally, and how quickly and maybe how accurately you formed judgments. For anyone trying to learn or improve, or maybe facing some friction in their interactions, that kind of raw data about yourself is just invaluable.
Indisputably. Let's take Tom, for example. He was a college freshman studying engineering, I think. He was really struggling with group projects, felt isolated, misunderstood a lot of the time. So he started journaling. He'd note specific incidents, writing things like, felt dismissed when they ignored my idea about the testing phase. Initially, his journal entries really painted him as the victim, poor group dynamics.
Yeah, that feeling of being shut down or ignored is such a strong trigger. Makes you instantly defensive.
It really does. But the journal allowed him to see beyond that first emotional hit. As he kept writing over several weeks, consistently reflecting, he started noticing another pattern in his own entries. Yes, he felt dismissed, but he also documented his own internal thoughts, how he was mentally picking apart other people's ideas before they even finished explaining them. He realized his own tone in those meetings was often defensive. His body language was probably closed off.
So the journal didn't just show him how others were communicating poorly. It showed him how he was contributing to the problem.
Exactly. That was the powerful shift. Not just they're doing it wrong, but wait, my own defensive tone, my assumption that their ideas aren't good. Maybe that's creating a barrier that makes them dismiss me. That insight led to a conscious, planned change. He started deliberately practicing active listening, asking more open questions, working on sounding assertive but still collaborative. And by the end of the semester, not only did his group project grades shoot up, but he actually built some real friendships because people started seeing him as open and collaborative, not defensive.
Okay, so moving from self-awareness outward. Listening is obviously the bedrock of connection. And the journal seems like maybe the ultimate training ground for empathy, because it forces you to record not just the facts, but those subtle emotional clues, the tone shifts, the unspoken context, the nonverbal stuff that often tells the real story.
That ability to capture nuance is exactly what separates just, transactional hearing from genuine connection. Think about journaling after a difficult talk with a loved one. It prompts you to look past the surface complaint. You might write down, okay, she said work was overwhelming.
Mm-hmm.
But her voice kind of cracked when she said the word alone, and she wasn't really making eye contact. Maybe the real issue isn't just the workload. Maybe it's a deeper feeling of burnout, or maybe feeling unappreciated. That kind of insight leads to a supportive response that actually helps, rather than just offering a quick, superficial suggestion.
We have a really critical example here with Maria and her husband, right? Their relationship was genuinely in crisis because of communication breakdown.
Yes. Maria and her husband, they were in their early 40s and just stuck. Constantly having the same arguments, the same misunderstandings. They were seriously considering divorce. So they decided to try a shared listening journal practice, but with real discipline. The key was they each reflected on the same conversations, but separately first, documenting their own individual take.
Hang on, isn't there a risk there? If they're both focusing hard on their emotional interpretation, couldn't that just add more subjectivity, more fuel to the fire? How did the journal help keep things objective?
That's a really important question. The journal actually helps reduce subjectivity because it introduces this neutral third party, the written entry. They weren't fighting in the heat of the moment anymore. They were documenting things afterwards, separately. Maria described how their entries often started by pointing out the discrepancy. Okay, I heard you say you were tired, but based on that heavy sigh, I felt like you meant you felt unappreciated. Writing it down created distance.
I see.
Then they could come together and discuss the documented entry, asking things like, okay, is that really what I meant? Where did my sigh or my tone mislead you?
That's actually profound. It separates the raw words from the interpretation and lets them tackle the interpretation itself in a much calmer setting.
Precisely. And this practice slowly rebuilt their understanding. It gave them a structured space to lay out their subjective experience without triggering an immediate defensive reaction. It helped them move past the surface arguments, who forgot to do the dishes, and get to the deeper hidden needs driving the conflict, like the need to feel supported or valued. They really credit the journal with fundamentally changing how they communicate, rebuilding trust, and ultimately, saving their marriage.
And then in the professional world, this practice feels like a real competitive edge. We often call effective listening a soft skill, but it directly links to leadership ability, inspiring teams, and closing those tough deals.
It's often the spark for innovation too, isn't it? For professionals, journaling isn't just about noting decisions made. It's about listening for those faint signals, market trends, hesitation from an investor, the unspoken needs of a customer. You're trying to tune in to what they wish they could articulate, not just what they explicitly ask for.
Let's talk about Alex, the startup founder. He was getting hit with rejection after rejection from investors. How did his journal, his quiet reflection, help him turn things around?
Alex was really diligent after one particularly tough rejection meeting. He didn't just write down the official reason they gave him, the standard market is saturated line. He focused intensely on the delivery. He wrote something like, okay, the main partner said the market was saturated, but I noticed a real hesitation, like a physical pause, and a shift in his posture when I talked about scaling up. That felt more like deep-seated risk aversion than a fundamental problem with the market itself.
That is such a crucial distinction. Someone just taking notes might miss that entirely. If you just accept market saturation, you might waste months pivoting your whole strategy. But if you sense the real objection is risk aversion, your approach changes instantly.
Absolutely. Alex used that insight, gleaned purely from listening deeply and reflecting, to completely rework his pitch. He shifted the focus away from just aggressive growth projections, which probably amplify their sense of risk, and instead highlighted elements like financial loss mitigation, lower risk entry points, and a really clear plan for protecting their capital. That subtle but critical strategic adjustment, driven entirely by analyzing the investor's tone and body language in his journal, was what helped him secure his next round of funding.
Okay, beyond the external wins, there's the internal benefit too. Journaling in general is known to help with anxiety, right? Getting thoughts out of your head. But adding this specific listening focus seems like it could be a powerful way to manage the sheer overwhelm of information we face every day.
It really brings clarity to the chaos. For anyone dealing with information overload or generalized anxiety or even neurotypes like ADHD, the journal can be a vital anchor. It takes that constant stream of auditory input and turns it into manageable processed insights. It stops you from feeling mentally swamped. We saw this clearly with Lena, a 28-year-old writer diagnosed with ADHD.
Can you elaborate on how she used it? Why was just scribbling so effective for her?
Lena found that during dense lectures or long podcasts, her working memory just got overloaded fast. Information would come in and poof, it was gone. Yeah. She literally said, scribbling after podcasts helped me retain info without distraction. For someone with ADHD, that immediate physical act of reflecting and writing forces a pause in the constant stream of input. That brief processing moment helps ensure the knowledge actually gets encoded, rather than just washing over her. It's like a physical, external tool for her working memory, and it dramatically improved her focus and retention without needing the huge mental effort of constantly fighting distraction.
So it really doesn't matter if you're a founder chasing funding, a partner trying to reconnect, or a student just trying to focus in class. The journal seems to address this core human need for structure, for processing, and for growth across the board. The benefits really do seem to compound.
Okay, so once you're sold on the why, the implementation, the how becomes really crucial. The format you choose for your journal has to fit your lifestyle seamlessly. Because consistency, honestly, is the absolute make or break factor here for long-term success. #, format selection, physical versus digital.
All right, let's tackle that first big choice. The old school paper notebook versus a sleek digital app. What are the real pros and cons here, especially thinking about the psychology of reflection itself?
Well, traditional physical notebooks have some distinct advantages, actually rooted in how our brains work. The physical act of writing by hand, it's slower than typing. And that physical engagement seems to light up different parts of the brain. Some studies suggest the motor memory involved in handwriting actually helps encode memories better and encourages deeper processing of complex ideas.
So the very act of slowing down, forming the letters, kind of forces a cognitive speed bump, which enhances the reflection itself.
That's a great way to put it, yeah. The pros for physical, fewer distractions, no pop-up notifications, right?
Definitely.
Portability without worrying about battery life, and real creative freedom. You can doodle, use colors for emotions, draw diagrams, mind maps. The reflective space can feel cleaner, maybe. The obvious cons are logistical. Hard to search for keywords, and there's always the risk you might lose it.
Okay, and what about for those of us who live digitally, the efficiency-focused people?
Digital options, things like Notion, Day One, or even specialized reflection apps, they really shine when it comes to searchability and organization. Strengths are obvious: easy editing, setting reminders maybe linked to location, and the safety net of cloud backup. Plus, you can easily link multimedia, maybe an audio clip, a relevant article, a calendar event.
But what's the potential downside psychologically with digital?
The main one is introducing screen fatigue. And, more critically, the constant lure of notifications. That little ping can instantly shatter the focus you need for deep reflection. Also, some argue the speed of typing can sometimes lead to more superficial note-taking, just capturing facts rather than digging into analysis. Really, the choice has to match your personality, your discipline, and how you work best.
We see that contrast pretty clearly in the examples you mentioned, Jordan and Emily.
Right. Jordan, he's a high school teacher. He uses this thick, leather-bound journal. For him, it's a whole ritual. He described, like, lighting a candle and writing by hand after parent-teacher conferences. That physical, ritualistic act helps him process the stress and regulate his emotions after potentially difficult interactions. Then you have Emily, who works remotely, manages tons of digital info. She uses Notion. Her focus is pure efficiency and connection. She builds templates, links, entries to project docs, basically turning her journal into this powerful, searchable growth database. #, customizing the setup.
Okay, so whether it's paper or pixels, the journal needs to be personalized. what kind of structures can people set up inside their journal to really tailor it to what they need?
Personalization is key for sticking with it. We definitely recommend setting up dedicated sections. For instance, a manager might create a feedback analysis log just for decoding performance reviews. Someone who feels emotions deeply might need an empathy entry tracker to maybe monitor the emotional load of listening. You could have pages for weekly reviews, or maybe a section called trigger point documentation. If you're visual, use color coding for different emotions or recurring themes. Integrate diagrams. The main thing is the setup should signal, okay, this is my dedicated space and time for reflection.
Right, so we've got the container, physical or digital, customized. Now, what exactly goes inside each entry? You said structure breeds depth, pushing us past just venting?
Absolutely. To make sure the reflection is actually deep and constructive, not just rambling, each entry should ideally follow a consistent structure, like a blueprint.
Okay, let's break down those essential parts, starting with just the facts.
First, the basic details. Date, time, context like Nov 10, 2025, 4 p.m., review meeting with Sarah at HQ. And the source who was speaking, was it a lecture, a podcast, a friend? This just anchors the experience objectively.
Next up, the content summary. And you stress this isn't a full transcript, right? That would take forever.
No, definitely not verbatim. Focus on paraphrasing the core message, the key points, maybe the critical turning points. For example, boss talked about Q4 delays, stress need for better team collab, but only named person A and person B. You capture the gist and any emphasis you noticed.
Okay, now we get to the really crucial part, the one that demands some real honesty. Your reactions. This sounds like the engine room of self-discovery.
This is where you capture that raw, immediate, internal data. The stuff that often drives your behavior without you even realizing it. What was your gut emotional response? Write it down. Felt really frustrated. Why did that critique sting so much? Document physical sensations. My heart started racing when they mentioned the new deadline. Notice my shoulders tense up like I was bracing for impact. And critically, capture those initial unfiltered thoughts or biases. My very first thought was, they have no idea what they're talking about. Documenting this stuff shines a light on those subconscious patterns.
I think noticing the physical cues is often the first real step to changing things, isn't it? The body often knows there's a conflict before our logical brain filters it.
Spot on. The body doesn't lie. Okay, finally, we move to the analysis part, reflections and learnings. This is what turns a simple diary entry into a growth tool. Capture your insights. Okay, I realized I interrupted because I was actually afraid of being overlooked, so I jumped in to prove I was engaged. Then, formulate concrete, actionable steps. Next meeting, I will consciously pause for a 5 count before responding. Ask yourself tough questions. What if the uncomfortable thing they said is actually valid? How would that change my approach? And then, just to keep the practice positive and sustainable, maybe end with a quick note of gratitude or affirmation. Grateful I noticed this, even though it's tough. It's a step.
That structural discipline really seems to be what makes it effective, and we can see the immediate real-world payoff of using the structured approach with Priya, the nurse you mentioned.
Yes. Priya works in a busy hospital, and she consistently used these elements after talking with patients. She'd know the patient's words, sure, but her powerful reflections came from noticing the gap between what they said and how they presented nonverbally. She wrote something like, "Patient reported pain is constant but manageable, but his eyes were darting around, and he was gripping the sheets hard when talking about going home. I sensed fear, not just pain."
Wow, that's listening on a whole other level. Truly compassionate.
It is. And that documented insight, that reflection, allowed her to go beyond just treating the symptom, pain, and address the underlying need, fear about lack of support at home. This analysis directly led to better, more personalized care plans and actually improved patient satisfaction scores. Deep listening, when analyzed properly through this kind of journal structure, becomes a powerful professional tool.
Okay, so just having the structure isn't quite enough. To really get the most out of this, we need some specific techniques, right? Ways to move beyond just keeping the journal to really maximizing its impact.
And it bears repeating. The quality of your reflection hinges directly on the quality of the listening that came before it. Think of the journal as the tool you use to refine your listening performance itself. Hashtag tag techniques for maximizing impact. First, integrate the practices. Use active listening prompts before you even sit down to journal. During the conversation itself, consciously practice things like paraphrasing what the speaker said, asking clarifying open-ended questions. Then, when you journal later, you're essentially giving yourself a performance review on those skills. Ask, did I paraphrase correctly? What nonverbal cues did I totally miss in the moment that I only remembered later?
That really elevates it, doesn't it? It's not just recall, it's a structured assessment of your own communication skills. It keeps you accountable.
Definitely. Next, we really recommend timed reflections. Don't let hours go by. Try setting a timer, maybe just 10 or 15 minutes right after the conversation or event ends. This taps into neuroscience. Memory consolidation is strongest right after the experience. It helps you capture the freshest thoughts, the immediate emotional flicker, the most accurate details before your memory starts to, smooth things over or filter things out.
And since a big goal is spotting patterns over time, the weekly review seems like a really powerful technique to leverage all the data you're collecting.
Consistency builds the data, yes, but only structured review builds the actionable insight. Set aside some dedicated quiet time. Sunday evenings work for many people to systematically go back through your entries from the past week. Don't just skim them, really analyze them. Look for recurring themes. I noticed defensiveness popped up 3 times this week, always in talks with family, specifically when money was mentioned. Or maybe, wow, all the conversations I felt really good about involved moments where I consciously asked follow-up questions. This kind of tracking helps you pinpoint your emotional triggers and identify which communication strategies are actually working for you.
How does actually writing it down help with that analysis, beyond just remembering?
It creates distance and allows for categorization. For example, looking back at a week's entries, you might literally tag them by primary emotion: frustration, connection, confusion, excitement. If you see, say, 70% tagged frustration, that tells you pretty clearly that your main area for growth right now might be emotional regulation during conflict. Then you can focus your efforts for the next week or month specifically on that.
And for those using digital journals, adding multimedia could potentially deepen things even more.
It can, used thoughtfully. If it's appropriate and you have permission, maybe record a quick voice memo right after a meeting, capturing your raw thoughts. Your tone might reveal more than just writing. You could attach a photo of the whiteboard notes. Or, if reviewing a lecture, note the exact timestamps of key moments. This lets you instantly jump back to the precise audio or visual context that sparked your reflection, making the learning more targeted. Hashtag integrating with other growth practices.
Okay, so the journal shouldn't exist in a vacuum. For real holistic growth, we should probably try to connect it with other personal development things we might be doing. Create a whole growth ecosystem, sort of.
That's a great way to think about it. One obvious link is with mindfulness and meditation. Maybe do a short meditation before you journal, just to clear the mental clutter and approach the reflection with a calmer, more focused mind. There are even guided meditations out there specifically designed to sharpen listening skills, which would directly improve the quality of what you put into the journal.
And how can this journal process speed things up if someone is working with, say, a therapist or a coach?
Oh, it's incredibly efficient for that kind of work. The journal provides concrete, self-reported evidence of patterns and triggers. You're not just relying on fuzzy memories from 2 weeks ago, you're bringing documented data points. We mentioned Lisa earlier. She used specific excerpts from her journal to show her therapist exactly how certain childhood patterns were playing out in her current relationships. That documented evidence helped them get to the core issues much faster, significantly accelerating her progress.
Makes sense. And beyond the personal or therapeutic, what about applying this to more intellectual pursuits, like language learning?
Absolutely essential there. When learning a language, the journal is perfect for capturing those subtleties, regional accents, specific idioms, cultural nuances that textbooks just can't teach. You could document a tricky conversation in your target language, noting something like, misunderstood the conditional tense in that request, thought it was a command which caused friction. Need to review that structure.
And finally, bringing it back to the professional world, integrating this with leadership development frameworks. This feels key for anyone in a management or executive role.
Yes. Leaders should regularly journal after team meetings, one-on-ones, client interactions. Use the entries to objectively assess, is my communication style actually matching the leadership principles I say I value? Am I really showing empathy during feedback sessions, or am I just going through the motions? The journal provides that honest, reflective data point to check if your self-perception aligns with your documented behavior, driving really targeted improvements based on evidence.
These strategies are just so adaptable, aren't they, from the classroom to the boardroom? Let's maybe run through a few more quick specific examples just to show how different people might use the journal for very particular goals. Really highlight its versatility. Okay, first, let's revisit the student experience with Mia. Her big challenge was common, just staying focused and retaining info in lectures.
Right. Mia, the college student, she used her journal specifically to track her attention, not necessarily the lecture content itself. A typical entry might be, Professor explaining complex proof. Noticed I zoned out around step 3, got distracted by someone tapping a pen nearby. Learning. Sit closer to the front next class, maybe use noise-canceling earbuds. By systematically tracking when and why she lost focus and then immediately tweaking her strategy for the next time, she basically trained her focus muscle. And it worked. Her grades climbed steadily from C's to A's over a couple of semesters.
Then there's Kevin, the sales rep. He used his journal almost like a secret weapon for competitive intelligence.
Kevin made it a strict habit. Journal immediately after every significant client call. After one call that seemed positive, he wrote something like, "Client verbally agreed on the price point." Okay, but his tone was really flat, and he definitely hesitated when we talked about the delivery schedule. That little documented observation, that hesitation, prompted him to ask a very specific follow-up question later, one that wasn't obvious. And it turned out the client's real concern wasn't the price or timeline, but a competitor who was promising faster integration.
So the journal entry, capturing those subtle nonverbals, helped him uncover the hidden objection that could have easily scuttled the deal down the line.
Exactly. And knowing that allowed Kevin to pivot his follow-up. He focused on the long-term quality and support his company offered versus the competitor's quick fix, and he ended up closing a major deal. The journal gave him that crucial leverage.
And one more, Raj, the self-growth seeker, who used this while traveling alone in a pretty unique way.
Raj practiced this really interesting form of empathy building. While solo traveling, he'd sometimes journal his reflections on conversations he simply overheard in hostels, cafes, wherever. He wasn't intruding, just observing and documenting his internal response. He shared an example. Overheard a stranger briefly share a very emotional story about a recent loss. I just listened fully, felt empathy from a distance. And reflecting on it later unexpectedly helped me process some of my own unresolved grief. He found that intentionally listening to and reflecting on others' vulnerability actually strengthened his own emotional resilience during his trip. Listening kind of healed the listener too. Hashtag addressing common challenges. Now, while the benefits are clearly huge, we have to be realistic. Anyone starting a new reflective habit like this is going to hit some bumps in the road. Let's talk about the common challenges.
Okay, number one, probably the most universal, consistency issues. Life gets busy, old habits are strong, and it's easy for practices like journaling to fall by the wayside.
Yeah, that's the big one. The best strategy here is usually habit stacking. Link your journaling time to something you already do without fail, maybe right after you brush your teeth, or do your first cup of coffee, or as the very last thing you do before closing your laptop. And if motivation is really low or time feels impossibly tight, go micro. Commit to literally one sentence per day, just one. That super low barrier keeps the habit alive, maintains momentum, even on tough days.
What about when the entries start feeling shallow? You're writing stuff down, but it feels like you're just summarizing, not getting any real breakthroughs.
Yeah.
The depth versus surface level problem.
When that happens, you need to actively challenge yourself with more probing prompts. Stop asking what happened. Ask things like, what was the single most surprising thing I heard? Or how did this specific comment challenge a belief I hold really strongly? Or even, if I had to argue for the other person's perspective right now, what would my top 3 points be? Those kinds of questions force you to move beyond simple description into deeper analysis.
And the last one, which can be tricky, overwhelm from emotions. Digging deep, especially around conflict or sensitive topics, can definitely stir up some intense, difficult feelings.
That's a very real possibility. And it's important to approach reflection with self-compassion. When you know you're reflecting on something heavy, make it a rule to consciously end the entry on a constructive or even positive note. We mentioned Sophie, who, after a really tough entry about family issues, deliberately added, "Grateful for this awareness, even though it hurts, it's a necessary step toward healing." That balances it out. And crucially, if the emotional overwhelm feels sustained or too much to handle alone, remember the journal is a tool, not a replacement for seeking professional support like therapy. Hashtag outro.
So wrapping this all up, what's the big takeaway? I think building a listening journal isn't really about hitting perfection with every single entry. You're definitely going to miss days. Some entries might feel kind of flat, and that's okay. It's unquestionably about the ongoing, consistent intention. In a world that just constantly rewards speaking, reacting instantly, pushing your own view, making the deliberate choice to first listen deeply and then to critically reflect on that listening, that feels genuinely revolutionary. It's a powerful act of self-improvement.
I agree. And the knowledge, the framework we've discussed here, it's immediately usable. You have the structure, you have the techniques. You can literally start today. The journal really does transform communication. It takes it from being just a surface-level exchange of words and turns it into this profound, measurable tool for discovering more about yourself, forging deeper connections, and refining how you operate in the world. Your journey to really understanding yourself and others better can start with that very first reflective entry.
So maybe grab that notebook or open that app later today. Think back on a recent conversation. Could be one that felt a bit off, caused some friction, or maybe one that felt really good, really connected. What did you actually hear? And then what could you have heard if you'd been listening just a little bit more deeply? And maybe ask yourself this final provocative thought, something that really gets to the heart of this practice. How does my own fear of being overlooked or maybe misunderstood truly impact my ability to genuinely hear what other people are trying to tell me? We hope this deep dive provided valuable insights for your personal and professional growth. Please be sure to like, share, and subscribe to this YouTube channel.